Welcome to Crypto Disrupted. I'm your host, Trent Lipinski, and I'm here with Arthur, the CEO of Liquidity Network. Hey, Arthur, how's it going? What are you working on?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I'm working on the Liquidity Network.
Nice. Can you give us an introduction of yourself and your experience and your background?
Yes, so I'm French-German. I grew up mostly in Germany, but studied in France at the engineering school. So I'm mostly a tech guy, computer science. I also studied in Switzerland, in Sweden and Finland, where I did a security master. And later I went to Switzerland at ETH Zurich, my PhD. So from 2011 to 2016, and from 2012 to 2016, where I did like a full-time PhD on blockchain, security, privacy, and scalability, with a focus on proof of work blockchain. So anything related to Ethereum, Bitcoin. So I handled this aspect. I mean, this technology mostly from an academic point. So this means I analyze the security, the privacy provisions, try to understand, for example, if you have like 6 Bitcoin block confirmations, what does this actually mean in terms of security? How many blocks does this correspond to in Ethereum? Is this fine enough for like $1 million transaction? Is it fine enough for a $10 million transaction? Right. So basically quantifying the provisions that you get in terms of security and privacy.
Nice. And so you're the first guest that I've had on the show that actually has an academic background in blockchain. Can you kind of, explain that a little bit? You've actually got a PhD, you're a doctor. So can you kind of tell us, like, what was it like to, get a PhD in a cutting edge technology like this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's very valuable. And so fundamentally, if you look at blockchain, what is blockchain? Blockchain is a way of taking away, like shifting the trust assumptions. So instead of trusting in a single entity, you're trusting into a network of peers, right? So it's like no longer one central point of failure and trust, which might be good in some systems, but now you're like kind of like sharing this trust in a network of peers, and you don't know them. They can join and leave at any time. So this needs to be analyzed, and this is something which is very interesting for academics, because like 10 years ago, 9 years ago, when Bitcoin came about, it wasn't really clear what are the security provisions there. People actually thought, oh, payments on the blockchain on Bitcoin are private, which they're not, right? By far not. Cash is much more private. So to quantify and to analyze these provisions is something that academics love. And I mentioned to you at the beginning that you're changing the trust assumptions to a network, and this by definition is security. So I'm a security guy. I started hacking like code when I was like very young, at a very young age, and I did security testing from 16 years old onwards. So I'm kind of fundamentally into security in general. And for me, blockchain is security fundamental. Like it's a fundamental part of blockchain because of this change of trust.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to academics, they always like questions. They like questions like, what does this mean? Okay, why do you have so many nodes here? Okay, why do you only have so many transactions there? Why do you have like selfish mining there? I mean, there are different aspects, right, that needs to be analyzed. And the more questions, the merrier in general for academics. And if you're pursuing a PhD, I can just recommend you to just follow what you think is the most exciting path for yourself. So I started my PhD and I didn't have really any topic in mind. My advisor was very nice to me and just said, okay, you're going to work in the security aspects here, read those papers. They were about web search privacy. And here, read those papers. They're maybe about Bitcoin. And then you just choose. You have to choose your way. And it's best to choose the way that's the most exciting to you, because then you yield the best results. And this is what I did. I basically, from the very beginning, it was clear to me I want to work on Bitcoin. Ethereum wasn't even. And this was very exciting. I mean, I remember the first thing I did was to just build a tool to spam a node with transactions, to see just how many transactions I can push through just to spam a node, just to play around, right? And this is what people should do. They should play around, see how things work. And
so So what do you think about what's happened over the last couple of years? I mean, obviously in 2017, we saw, essentially an explosion in the crypto space, billions of dollars raised in ICOs. The entire landscape of blockchain has really accelerated quickly. What are you seeing, as someone who's been studying this for a very long time, what's happening right now?
So it's been a big change, I have to say. For someone who was early in, probably I would say, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think a lot of people who were very early in don't like the space anymore, because it's all about making money, because it's about like just making the quick buck in an ICO, or some trading. But a lot of people that were in at the beginning, they were in because they like this idea of a decentralized system, of changing the security provisions, right? And not having centralized systems. Whereas I see nowadays, people are actually moving away from, okay, yeah, we can scale, so let's just build like the central node, which is like just allows us to make things faster. That's not the spirit that was the spirit back then. So this is on the negative side. On the positive side, I think it's awesome to have such a big community and so many people interested in this. So I'm a lecturer at Imperial College London, where I'm giving a master course to like over 90 students on this very topic. And they're just super excited about the project, about the topic. They like the material that I'm teaching there. So it's, in general, there are many people genuinely interested in the technology. And that's very rewarding for me, and I like to teach that. One last thing you said, it has accelerated, the space has accelerated very much. It's true, but I also see a lot of promises and not many people delivering, and that's a major issue, I think. So it's fine to do an ICO if you need to, or if you have a great idea, but a great idea in itself is not enough. I think people should only do ICOs if they actually already have a working version of their product that they want to just boost in order to let it go to bring it to market quicker. I think that should be looked more.
Well, and you're actually leading by example when you say that, because you've developed a product. So can you kind of talk about what some of the problems are that you see with blockchain and some of the solutions that you yourself are working on?
Yeah, so my PhD quantified the number of transactions that you can do in a network without sacrificing the security. And if you tweak some parameters in Bitcoin, maybe you can get, or Ethereum, maybe you can get to about 100 transactions per second. This compared to Visa is not enough. Visa handles like over 50,000 transactions a second. So by default, like with the design that you have nowadays, you will not reach Visa level transaction speeds. So what can you do? There are people working on sharding. So this means like you partition the network in smaller pieces, and in this smaller piece, you can reach consensus faster. But still, you need to like get consensus with the other shards, which are also there, right? So that's quite still, yeah, I'm a bit skeptical, but I think there are excellent teams working on that. So I'm very much looking forward to what they're producing. Then there is proof of stake, or different types of consensus algorithms like Byzantine fault tolerant. Might be a solution, but it changes the trust assumptions in most cases. You won't have the same trust assumptions as in proof of work, as far as I've seen, which I might be wrong, obviously, because there's so many solutions out there. Then there is off-chain payments. So something along like Lightning, right, where you have like two parties, and they open a payment channel between themselves. So how do they do this? They do this by depositing some ether, for example, in a channel. So they say on the chain, they say, I would like to open a channel with this other party. And then they hold some ether in a deposit box on the chain in a smart contract. And then they can go off chain. So it's a layer up, and then they can exchange here transactions just among themselves. Okay. And just like, hey, I'm sending you this. Okay, thanks. I'm sending you this. Thanks. So the fundamental change here is, instead of how blockchain typically works, is that if I make a transaction to you, I have to send it to everyone, even to your grandma, right?
Yeah.
Although your grandma is probably not interested in the transaction that I'm sending.
Probably not. I don't think she's figured out cryptocurrency yet.
Exactly. Yes. So the idea of off-chain is to have like a few number of peers, and only you communicate only among those peers. And that's fundamentally what's important. You should not communicate to everyone. But Lightning or Raiden or Trinity, I mean the copies of Lightning, they have fundamental issues, of which I have described them before. Emin Günsira, for example, from Cornell University, said it's economically broken, which I agree. There's too much collateral that you need to deposit. It's just the design. The design is, I mean, I don't think it can scale properly. There might be some optimizations later to make it work, but I think as we see it nowadays, it will be very hard. And so what I've been building and what my co-founder Rami Khalil invented is the Liquidity network. So it's a complete redesign of off-chain payment systems. And this is really, I think that's great. This is exactly what we need. It solves a lot of problems of the Lightning network, Raiden network, and it's scalable to millions of users. It allows you to do service level agreements on an unreliable blockchain such as Ethereum, which is very important for many businesses, right? You want to know how much your transaction fees cost, and you want to know how many transactions you can push through, and you want to know what's the latency that you get, right? And I mean, there's so many things you want to know that the blockchain can't guarantee you. And Liquidity, you can think, is like an upper layer that abstracts away and that evens out the uncertainties of the underlying layer. You can think of it. Yes.
So is it in nature or the architecture, is this still a decentralized system? Can you kind of talk about the architecture? How does it function as this kind of upper layer above an existing blockchain?
Can you define how you define decentralization or centralization?
So centralization to me is when there is, a primary centralized, in this use case, some kind of server typically. So whoever is typically controlling the server is typically, the centralized source of where the data and, what you're actually accessing when you're on the network. So the network itself is this centralized server that you're accessing. A decentralized system is where you're accessing essentially different nodes within a network. And then each node within that network, has either a copy of the blockchain or, some kind of agreement system in place on how it operates within that network to kind of create this system that's decentralized so that there is no centralized server. So if one server goes down, it doesn't take the entire system with it. For example, reddit.com is, a forum and, content sharing website. It's a social media site. They have a centralized server. If Reddit server goes down, Reddit goes down. There are no other copies of Reddit. So if there was a decentralized version of a site like Reddit, there would be multiple servers that have multiple copies of that content. So if one server went down, the rest of Reddit wouldn't go down with it. So that's kind of how I see centralization versus decentralization, at least from a computer standpoint. It's really about the network and where the data is located and what the agreement system is for how you access that data on the network.
Sounds good. I think there are two things in your definition of centralization. I would call it rather redundancy. Mm-hmm. So it's not about whether there's only one node or redundancy is about, is there one node or are there several nodes that can offer the service, right? And if this one node goes down, then you can still go to the others. That's redundancy. It's like in the web, you can have like a load balancer, right? If you have a web server, you can have like different web or like a content delivery network. You can have different servers available. They host all the same content. And so would you call this decentralized?
Not necessarily, because it's still controlled by a centralized authority. So I think the agreement system and the consensus system is kind of this other, system component to blockchain and to decentralization that's critical. It's the governance system essentially of how that works. So that's the difference for me in a centralized system versus a decentralized system, is who is the authority, who's in control of that system. So
excellent. Yeah. So basically we agree. So there are two parts to it. There's redundancy. So Is there only one server or are there several servers? And who owns your private key? So who owns your funds, right? This is the fundamental thing. So let me answer another question. So in Liquidity, you have multiple payment hubs. So the architecture that we envision is a network of payment hubs. So these payment hubs, each of them can have millions of users. In this sense, they are so-called supernodes. We can call them supernodes. Yeah? What's very important is they are not a custodian. At no point in time do they own your funds. If they go down, you can still take out your funds from the smart contract, right? They cannot run away with your money. So this is the part of custodian versus non-custodian. If Reddit goes down, they take your data with you, right? With them. Where if your bank goes down, they take your money with them.
Yep.
But if a Liquidity hub goes down, it can take your money with you. That's the first part. So now let's tackle redundancy. So a user can choose to connect to only one hub, or it can choose to connect to multiple hubs, or one single hub can be redundant as a server, just as a content delivery network server can have redundancy to offer better availability. That's also feasible.
Okay, so you've created a governance system that essentially stores the actual assets, the cryptocurrency in this case, in these smart contracts. So even if that network goes down, the smart contract still exists because you've got a copy of that smart contract with whatever wallet system that you're using to access the network. So
totally.
So then the actual network itself is not actually holding your assets. It's within this kind of not third party, but kind of this mediary smart contract system that both parties, both the hub and the user, have access to.
Very much. Otherwise, I mean, basically, if I would be holding the funds, or Liquidity would be a custodian which holds funds of users, it's just another bank. It doesn't make any, I mean, there's no interest in building such a thing, right? No, we
the banks would argue otherwise.
So what's interesting, what we believe the Liquidity network fundamentally is a non-custodial finance intermediary. So you have finance intermediaries nowadays, they offer certain services to their customers and they hold their funds. But now we have a new class of given the Liquidity network, we have a new class of potential, a whole new market setting where you have now finance intermediaries which are no longer custodians. So it's interesting because, like, also from a regulatory perspective, do you still need to do KYC AML if you're actually not holding funds, because you're literally only sending IOUs between people, right? So even regulators, so I'm in contact with the FINMA in Switzerland, for example, they don't know. They have no idea of how to handle this. And it's quite interesting to shake in a bit the existing system and to see that there might be other business cases and other business models for the customers, right? You can literally build a bank with that, which is not trusted, right? You don't have to trust the bank because the bank can still offer you services. The bank can still tell you, maybe you should not send funds to this person because we know that this person is not a legit person, right? So there's still like kind of services that can be offered, just like as every professional bank does nowadays, but without the bank actually owning the funds and without the bank having the ability to steal your funds. And this is very interesting.
So does your system actually have its own smart contracting system then, and that's how it's managing all the different funds? So, and then you're able to process those because you're doing this all off chain. So this isn't actually happening on the blockchain. So where does the blockchain actually come into play here with your system?
So you can think of it, the blockchain is only an intermediary in case of disputes. Okay. So if there's any disputes going on, then the blockchain, or specifically the smart contract, is kind of the judge, right? So a smart contract in general is kind of, the idea of a smart contract is to enable two parties to interact, even though those two parties, they don't trust each other. Because the smart contract is in the end the deciding entity that will tell you this is right and this is wrong, right? And that's literally what the smart contract does. In case of disputes, one party says, I'm not okay, I'm not all right with that, and I'm having here my proof. And either the other party counters this or it doesn't counter it, and then smart contracts cleans everything.
So it essentially functions similar to an escrow, except the process is fairly automated in a digital sense, since there's no actual physical asset of coins and there's a cryptocurrency, which is a digital asset instead.
Right. Yeah, you can think of it like this. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So what's and so can you kind of again, so what is the main advantages, like kind of explain the main advantages of what you've created versus the Lightning Network? I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I know a lot of people, you know, they've heard about the Lightning Network. There's a lot of buzz about it, but it sounds like you've created a superior solution. So can you kind of compare the two and why, you know, your system is more effective?
Sure. I'm happy actually also I'm actually giving a presentation at EdCon on Friday and specifically say like with nice slides and explanations, which is probably more clear than my voice alone. But let me just give you a few bad, like a few. It's not bad. I mean, Lightning is great. It's a great thing, it certainly will help the crypto community, but it's not the way to scale properly forward, I believe. It will help, but it's not the ultimate solution. We need more. And that's why we built the Liquidity. But regarding Lightning or any other technology that uses Lightning-like technology like Raiden or Trinity, fundamentally the design of Lightning tells you that you need to lock up funds. And if I want to trade with you, I have to lock up funds in a channel and tell, like in a smart contract, I lock up money and I say, this money I want to use with you. It's like kind of charging a prepaid card just for you, right?
Yeah.
So it means I put $10 or like $10 in this prepaid card that I use with you. But I am not only transacting with you, and I'm transacting with many other peers in the world. And so I need to lock up money for each of them. Well, this is what doesn't work, right? So what Lightning proposes that you do linked payment channels. So it means that if I have a connection with you and you have a connection with a friend of mine, then I can pay over you. So, but this means that you have to lock up money for me now, right? Because you have to lock up money with your friend. And I'm going to use this lockup. So in the end, there's going to be a lot of that lockup. And lockup can only be managed. So it can only be top-upped or removed with an on-chain transaction. This is exactly the point that we wanted to avoid, right? So economically, it's broken. So this is also what Professor Emin Günsira from Cornell University said. It has a lot of problems on the economical side.
Well, I think the funny thing is it mirrors how the banking system and how the credit system works today. So it's funny to, you know, articulate the Lightning Network, which kind of mirrors the existing financial system, and then argue that it's economically broken. Because if that system's economically broken, then you can literally argue that the existing financial system is economically broken as well, which in essence is kind of the theory of why, you know, blockchain and cryptocurrency is this new solution for solving, you know, ultimately both a economically broken financial system that exists today, and then also, you know, having the ability to kind of both create new systems like the Lightning Network, where you're kind of trying to mirror the existing system, but then, you know, solutions like what you've created can now potentially outcompete that in a free and open market. So that's kind of the fascinating thing about blockchain, is it enables this competition to exist, whereas with the current financial market, you know, there's no way really to innovate or create, you know, a new way of doing things with the existing technologies and systems that they've been using for the last 20, 30, 50 plus years. So now we're finally at a point in time where, you know, you can actually innovate and create a new system like what you've created, maintain that decentralization, and essentially, you know, solve not only the problems with, you know, the Lightning Network, but also the problems with the existing financial systems that are in place today.
Right. I'm not too sure how familiar Lightning now is with the existing financial system, because Lightning still is not a custodian, which is a big benefit, right? I would say, over the existing system. I like to be custodian myself if possible. I think this is what it's basically, I see it as a human right to be custodian. It's like you should be allowed to own your own money, right? And you should not have like to fear that someone just takes it away. Because they just don't want to, or they can't anymore, but the other problem of Lightning that I see is that if I want to send my friend something that I have to send over you, so if I want to forward a payment or multiple hubs, this is a problem which is called routing, and we have this in the internet. And so if I'm accessing this video that you've put up on YouTube, then I'm going through a set of servers, right? And in order to find this particular server, I have to find a route towards there. And this works for data packets, but many of these data packets, many like routed data packets, get lost over time. Yeah. I mean, because it's just like internet is unreliable. It's based on the internet protocol, which is in itself a best effort protocol, which is not, it doesn't guarantee anything. And Lightning is building on top of that. So it can, I would say routing is a complex topic. So I've myself studied internet routing like BGP, OSPF, RIP protocols. I know them, and it's really complex. And this also might explain why, so Raiden has been around for almost 3 years now. It was introduced in 2015 at Hong Kong Scaling Bitcoin, where I was as well. And I presented there as well. And it's still not really mainstream or like stable, right? I mean, it takes time to develop that, although there are many people apparently developing on it. So I'm just wondering, I even asked the people, so why is it not ready? And they say, yeah, we have some bugs. And it's fundamentally a complex design. And I don't think we should go for complex designs. I always favor simplicity over complexity. So, and Liquidity Network is just much more simple in the design.
And, you know, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but you've got code written. This is real. So can you kind of talk about your roadmap, where you're at right now, you know, what you've developed so far, what you're planning on developing in the future?
Yes, so we released on beginning of March, so it's already 2 months ago now. We released the testnet, and it's fully operational. Wallet.liquidity.network. You can spin up an off-chain wallet and send off-chain, like deposit funds off-chain to put them off-chain and then use them with another peer without paying gas. You can make nowadays Ethereum transaction without paying gas. So on Friday we're gonna release invitation-only beta mobile app that we have now. So not only will we have now a web-free version online that you can already test, we will also have a dedicated mobile app, which allows you to do bidirectional payments. This is not something that Lightning has one mobile app which only allows one directional payments. So basically, we are delivering something that doesn't even exist in Bitcoin yet. And we haven't seen any other off-chain wallet in Ethereum as well. So we are the first off-chain wallet for Ethereum. 15th of May, we're going to deliver an API where developers can develop their apps or dApps for the Liquidity Network. So it's like in about, almost 10 days. And we're going to release the mainnet in June this year. Okay. So it's also not long. Today is like less than 60 days. And for Q3, we are building a non-custodial off-chain exchange. I believe you heard about decentralized exchanges or DEXs, right?
Yes. Can you kind of talk about, you know, what a decentralized exchange is to you? And I'm sure you've got additional thoughts here you wanted to share as well, but can you kind of tell the audience, you know, what a DEX is? You know, we drop that term a lot, but it's nice to get an explanation with someone of your expertise.
Yeah, that sounds good. So let me first start with centralized exchanges. A centralized exchange is a bank where I make an account, I do KYC, I send money through a wire transfer or through my credit card, and then I have a balance there. And with this balance, I can then trade with other peers that are also in the centralized exchange. But the centralized exchange is a bank because it holds my funds. Custodian. Okay. So if we're moving now to a decentralized exchange, it means that we're moving away from a centralized custodian and we're putting the funds into a smart contract. And then the trades are being done over the blockchain. So it means that I'm sending a transaction to the smart contract and say, I want to trade X, like 1 Ether for 1 token, for example, right? So I'm sending a transaction, and then the smart contract tries to find another peer that also wants to do this trade because it has the other pair that I'm trading. And then if this is found, then good, I'm getting my trade, right? So that's a decentralized exchange that we currently see on the blockchain. So what's important is that this trade between us two is done and recorded through an on-chain transaction. So why is this problematic? Well, the Ethereum blockchain only supports 10 to 20 transactions per second, right? So it's not scalable. As we already discussed for payments, the same goes for trades. It won't scale. You will never be able to scale to a centralized transaction server speed. So maybe you've heard about Kraken or Bitfinex. Yeah. They're doing many transactions per second, and you won't be able to reach the speed simply because the Ethereum blockchain is not fast enough. So what we are building, because what we can do off-chain transfers, I can send you off-chain Ether, but we can also do off-chain swaps. So if I send you 1 Ether, you can send me 1 token and still do this off-chain and atomic. The atomicity property is very important because it means that if I send you 1 Ether and you send me 1 token, either both of these things happen together or none of them happen, right? So because you don't want to be in the situation where I send you 1 Ether and then you don't send me anything, right?
Yeah.
So, and
a lot of ICOs function like this. I've seen several ICOs that use a smart contract where you provide Ether or Bitcoin, and then they send you their token, and you have to do that swap to be able to get the token. So I've seen that in quite a few ICOs.
But ICOs are generally always trusted. I haven't seen any. Oh, that's actually a good question. I haven't seen any ICO that is, in a sense, trustless with their tokens because typically, I mean, even all the Bitcoin ICOs at the beginning, right? You send the Bitcoin, and there's no smart contract in the Bitcoin chain to kind of get you tokens in return. So actually, this is okay. This is another thing, but yeah, I don't think it makes sense to have a smart contract for an ICO.
Okay.
You know why? Because if let's say you do an ICO today, you get 10 million worth of Ether, okay, and everybody gets this token that you said will do great things, right? What prevents you from tomorrow creating a new smart contract with the same name, the same token, and you're just going to use this one, right? And you distribute the token differently. So ultimately, the trust is always in the project. The smart contract itself cannot enforce anything. And that's why I believe that having a smart contract for an ICO actually increases the security problems rather than improving it. The good thing is everything is transparent. Of the actions of an ICO, all are transparently visible on the blockchain. So, and this should be enough. Because you cannot enforce any honest behavior of an ICO project. It's like you have to believe in the team to actually deliver what they promised.
Well, and what's happening is a lot of these ICOs, they're essentially creating what's called a token economy. So, once they release their token, they've essentially, a lot of them, you can immediately trade that token on a decentralized exchange. So even though they don't have a product, or maybe they have a partial product, or they're just in testnet or whatever, you've got this situation where it's essentially almost like a stock that you have to maintain. So just like Facebook or Twitter or a publicly traded company, you now have the responsibility of maintaining the reputation of your token economy, and that is just as much public relations and marketing as it is actually delivering on a product or service. Obviously, having a product or service is extremely important, and that's where you're going to create the actual value for the users. But initially, for a lot of these ICOs, they're not, what I've seen is a lot of them aren't understanding the responsibility of having to maintain their token economy until they can get their product to market. And even once they get their product to market, they still then have a responsibility, much like a publicly traded company would have to their token holders or their shareholders, to maintain that level of transparency with their users, let them know what's happening on their roadmap, continue to interact with the community, continue to build a community, and do all of those things. What I'm seeing from a lot of ICOs is they go raise all this money, they have this big marketing push, and then they just completely disappear off the radar. Like their ICO ends, and it's like 6 months or a year later, then they suddenly resurface and go, oh yeah, here's our product and it's half complete. And that's just not the way to do it. Ultimately the better way to do it is to build a product, create value for your customers or your users, and prove that your token or your cryptocurrency actually has some kind of value to it. That's the whole idea of a utility token, is that it serves some form of utility. So it's definitely, we're at a fascinating time right now, like watching where the ICO space is going, seeing what's happening with the market, and seeing how there's essentially, I mean, this is essentially the birth of a new kind of stock exchange, a new form of valuing systems and currency, and a new form of valuing startups. So that now there's these tokens and these coins associated with the value and utility of the product.
I totally agree. And so at Liquidity, we have delivered the MVP, so the testnet on even before our pre-sale closed.
Nice.
So not before the ICO, but during the pre-sale, we delivered our MVP. I mean, the pre-sale that we did was public, and the ICO will be delivered, will be starting only after we release the mainnet. So. Okay. The ICO is actually, I mean, given the funds of the pre-sale now, we can push the mainnet forward. Yeah. But the ICO will come after even the mainnet release, and it will enable us to grow the network. We see the ICO really as an enabler to grow worldwide and to have the community building. This is really the core of the ICO. Why we think this is bringing value to us, and I see this big responsibility of just what you mentioned. I mean, just like engaging with the community even after your ICO. That's very important, right? And I as an academic and as a lecturer at Imperial College also have a reputation to lose. If I'm not delivering on my promises, then this can be very bad for everything that I have ever been built, right? As an academic, your whole reputation is your name. And if you're not delivering what you promised, then it can be quite dangerous. So in a sense, I take this responsibility very, very seriously, and that's why we do the ICO even after we release the mainnet.
Yep. Well, and it sounds like you're doing a very responsible and ethical ICO, and it has that extra layer of accountability that a lot of these other ICOs don't have, because your product's actually at mainnet and is usable by users, and they can immediately get the value of what they're buying into. So they're not just buying a future idea. They're buying an existing product that has an existing utility that they can use immediately. And I had one other quick question. So what cryptocurrencies does your system allow you to use? Is it just Ethereum, or can you do Bitcoin and other coins? And which cryptocurrencies can you use on your platform?
So for now, it's implemented on the Ethereum blockchain, which means that we can do Ether, and we will be supporting any ERC20 tokens as well. Okay. We can, however, as well deploy it on, for example, Rootstock, and then it supports Bitcoin, right? Okay. There are also the possibilities of building bridges between different blockchains. So you can have, for example, a Bitcoin ERC20 token on Ethereum, and at this point in time you will support Bitcoin. You can have basically a bridge between any blockchain. It's just how do you build this bridge, and what are the trust assumptions that you build, right? That you adhere to when you build this. But there are many possibilities of basically. I mean, I think you can bring any coin or any blockchain coin to Ethereum, for example, and have a ERC20 version of it. But fundamentally, Liquidity is a protocol. It's not married or bound to Ethereum. It can be developed for other chains. So we can develop it as well natively for Bitcoin, for Neo or other blockchains.
And do you have any thoughts on ERC, what is it, 721, the new token standard they're working on?
Yes, certainly. This is very much what we're looking at, and it's very likely that we're also supporting this.
Okay. So would that enable your system to also then be able to do digital asset management as well as just doing basic token management?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't promise it right now because we are not yet fully decided, but it's likely. Yeah.
because that could be interesting. Obviously, you know, that could be something to tackle in the future. Obviously, I'm sure you want to get your core functionality here, but you know, I know there's a lot happening in the blockchain space on the supply chain management side of things, as well as digital asset management, especially for video games. You know, I've been advising on a couple different startups in the game space, and you know, it's fascinating because you know, you've got a digital world essentially where now you can start to associate you know, digital assets, you know, and actually make them unique. You can give them a, you know, a unique signature or unique key, and actually be able to, you know, assign the same kind of properties and value to a digital asset as you would a physical, you know, tangible asset in the real world. So the blockchain in a way is going to enable us to be able to do that in virtual worlds. And that just, that wasn't possible 10 years ago. So, you know, it's definitely, you know, there's definitely going to be some interesting things once people start leveraging the blockchain for digital asset management and supply chain management.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yep. I think collectibles are very important, and also stable coins are very important as well for the blockchain system. As soon as we have a few reliable stable coins, it's going to solve a lot of problems. You no longer will need to change to fiat. You can just change to a stable coin if you don't want to gamble on the price.
And obviously you've built for the Ethereum network and you're very focused on what Ethereum's doing, but have you, you know, you obviously had to evaluate other blockchains and other systems before deciding to work on the Ethereum network. So what made you choose Ethereum over some of the other blockchain systems?
Yeah, it's just the maturity and the community behind it. That's the main reason. Well, we value a payment system is only valuable if it's being used by a community, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's no community, then what can you do? And there's and besides Ethereum, which other blockchain is really out there that allows you to program smart contracts or to implement new things in an approachable manner, because in Bitcoin script you certainly can't do much.
Yeah.
It's a pain. So it was a pretty easy choice, I would say.
Okay. There was no runner up. There was no struggle like, oh, should we do Neo or Stellar or one of the others? Or it was just like, all right, we're going to go with the top dog.
I mean, Stellar has not the same trust assumptions as proof of work, right? It's a completely different system. Neo is also different in this aspect. And at the time when we started developing, actually, it wasn't really usable to develop anything on top of this. You have also to know that security is a fundamental issue in smart contracts. So if you're going on a new blockchain and they have no proper security checks or like tools to evaluate your contracts, no best practices and so on, then building a financial system on top of a blockchain which has not yet any proven security is kind of a gamble in itself. There are enough reasons here.
And you know, one question I love to ask is, so what do you see in the future from the blockchain space and cryptocurrencies in general? I mean, obviously, you know, you've got your own solution you're working on that, and you're at the forefront of this technology. You're you know, doing lectures on this. You're teaching students on this. So where do you see things going? What does the future look like to you?
I think it's just moving forward to a non-custodial system, non-custodial finance intermediaries. So you can just continue to trade and to interact with your peers without necessarily trusting them and without having a trusted third party that you rely on for dispute mediation. And because this is the core, like what blockchain offers you, and this is the only thing. It will not solve. I mean, many people say blockchain is so great because it can solve so many issues, but it doesn't. There are a few key problems that it does solve, and it does solve them in a very nice manner. But they're limited. So I wrote a paper, Do You Need a Blockchain? It's actually a website also, doyoneedablockchain.com, that a friend of mine did. It's very funny. So they have very specific use cases where it makes sense. But I think it's important to always remain critical actually make sense to use a blockchain here, or should I maybe just use a database that can just spin up and that's fine, right?
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yes, my blockchain course from Imperial is open and online, freely available. So I'm happy to share that. So you can also share it with your audience. And it's rather technical. It's on the security side. So it's for if you have a basic computer science background, it's good.
Awesome. And where can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at head4sec. We do have a Telegram channel, Liquidity Network, which is a great source also to ask questions. I'm actually very actively answering the questions, and I'm always happy about technical questions that are, or like also economic questions that revolve around tokens. Yeah, why do you set this up like this? What are the trust assumptions and so on? So I like critical questions.
Awesome. And that's liquidity.network, correct?
That's the website. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. It's been awesome to have someone with an academic background to be able to articulate this for the audience. So again, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and yeah, all the best.
All right, take care.